public is being conditioned to track missile launches as the primary metric of threat. This is a deliberate misdirection. While legacy media focuses on kinetic spectacles, the expensive, high-signature events, adversaries are executing a far more sophisticated protocol. They have no intention of defeating the United States kinetically. The F-16 platform, for which Ukrainian pilots are having to invent new tactics because NATO doctrine proved ineffective, exemplifies this liability. Such systems represent a massive kinetic cost for a negligible strategic return in an asymmetric environment. Adversaries understand this. The objective is not to destroy the asset, but to make its deployment economically unsustainable. The real vector of attack is not loud, it is silent. According to analysts at RUSI, over 97% of global communications and trillions in daily financial transactions travel through a handful of vulnerable, undersea fiber optic cables. This is the true center of gravity for a debt-leveraged global system. The second vector of this silent war is orbital. CSIS reports detail the proliferation of non-kinetic anti-satellite capabilities, specifically dazzling, using ground-based lasers to permanently blind intelligence and GPS satellites. This is not science fiction. It is deployed capability. This two-pronged assault on data connectivity is designed to create a singular outcome: the blind Leviathan. A hegemon with unmatched kinetic power, but no ability to see, communicate, or process financial transactions. A carrier strike group becomes a floating liability. The Federal Reserve's liquidity operations freeze. The entire architecture of American power is neutralized without a single missile hitting U.S. soil. This is the silent vector designed to trigger a systemic solvency crisis. Adversaries do not initiate conflicts they expect to lose. Their pivot to asymmetric attacks is not a choice. It is a mathematical necessity born from their own solvency crisis. For nations like Russia, a prolonged, high-intensity conventional war is a domestic liability. CSIS analysis confirms that such conflicts drain national reserves and risk internal political collapse, making a symmetric, attrition-based war against a NATO-backed force fiscally impossible to win. This weakness forces a strategic pivot. If you cannot defeat an opponent's military assets symmetrically, you do not attack the assets. You attack the system that funds them. The objective shifts from destroying tanks to destroying liquidity. The target becomes the adversary's central vulnerability: systemic insolvency, a $38 trillion national debt that, as analyst Ray Dalio notes, future generations are already burdened with. The vector for this attack is energy. Reports from Reuters confirm that geopolitical crises, particularly involving nations like Iran, create stark swing factors in oil markets. This is not incidental. It is a feature of the new war. Strategic documents referenced by TFI Global News allude to a deliberate energy war designed to challenge the petrodollar and exploit these leverage points. By manipulating the global energy supply, an adversary can inflict direct economic pain, forcing an inflationary crisis that accelerates the hegemon's financial exhaustion. This economic warfare blueprint simultaneously neutralizes American military doctrine. A Ukrainian pilot's admission, reported by AOL.com, that NATO's F-16 tactics had to be rewritten for the current conflict is the critical data point. Expensive, legacy platforms are designed for a symmetric battlefield that no longer exists. Forcing a kinetic response in these new asymmetric environments drives up the kinetic cost for the United States, making its most powerful tools liabilities. Every dollar spent on an ineffective sortie is a victory for the adversary's solvency-based strategy. The central battlefield is no longer geographic, it is economic. The lethality of an asset is now inversely proportional to its cost. This is the new protocol of asymmetric warfare, designed to bankrupt a system, not just destroy its hardware. Analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, frame the kinetic cost imbalance with chilling clarity. A $5 million main battle tank can be neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a tactical exchange. It is a systemic attack on the Western defense procurement model. This radical cost disparity enables a strategy known as the democratization of violence. High-impact kinetic capability, once the exclusive domain of superpowers with trillion-dollar budgets, is now accessible to non-state actors and second-tier adversaries. It is the weaponization of consumer electronics against bespoke military platforms. For every multi-million-dollar F-16 sortie, which Ukrainian pilots report requires new, non-NATO tactics to survive, an adversary can launch dozens, if not hundreds, of low-cost threats. This forces a mathematical certainty, an attritional conflict where the hegemon's financial endurance is the primary target. The objective is not to win on the battlefield, but to accelerate the domestic solvency crisis of the United States. Every tank lost, every missile fired in defense, and every emergency aid package is a calculated drain on a system already buckling under a $38 trillion national debt. The adversary is not fighting the army, it is fighting the treasury. The regional instability you are shown is not a symptom of global chaos, it is a blueprint. Nations like South Africa, and even internal disruptions within allied states like Canada, are not failing organically. They are being engineered as proxy laboratories, controlled environments for testing economic warfare protocols before they are deployed against the primary target, the United States. The objective of these laboratories is to perfect attacks on economic leverage points. According to Reuters, the Iran crisis demonstrates how regional conflict is a swing factor for global oil prices. Adversaries are using these gray zones to field test the precise level of kinetic disruption required to trigger systemic liquidity shocks in energy markets. This is not random terror. It is calibrated economic warfare designed to stress the petrodollar system, which underpins American financial dominance, as noted in reports on the BRICS currency strategy. This strategy forces a U.S. kinetic response into environments where its primary assets become liabilities. A Ukrainian pilot confirmed that NATO training for the F-16 was for a different type of war, forcing them to invent new tactics on the fly. This is the goal. Adversaries are deliberately creating conflicts where a $100 million platform is sent to hunt a $50,000 drone. The kinetic cost is asymmetric. The F-16 is no longer a deterrent. It is an accelerant for an American solvency crisis. Every deployment to these manufactured gray zones exacerbates the central vulnerability. Ray Dalio quantifies this vulnerability at over $38 trillion in national debt. The adversary's blueprint is a mathematical certainty. Use proxy labs to trigger an energy crisis, which forces an expensive and ineffective U.S. military response, which in turn inflates the national debt. It is a feedback loop, a systemic vector from staged, low-cost regional conflicts directly to American insolvency. The inevitable endpoint of this strategy is to corner a financially depleted hegemon. As conventional platforms are neutralized and the treasury is drained, the strategic blueprint funnels the U.S. toward the only remaining lever to enforce global dominance, its own asymmetric escalation. The vector from national debt to nuclear risk is now direct. The next 12 months will see the proliferation of these proxy laboratories, not as news stories, but as staging grounds for the next phase of this solvency war. The Launch on Warning Protocol is the automatic tripwire for systemic annihilation. The doctrine dictates that if early warning systems detect an incoming strategic missile volley, a full retaliatory strike must be launched before the incoming weapons impact. This is not aggression. It is a mathematical protocol designed to prevent command and control decapitation. The entire framework is built on a single point of failure, the assumption that the radar data is real. Now, Vector in the asymmetric threat. An adversary understands it cannot win a symmetric, kinetic war, but it can launch a cyber attack against the satellite and ground-based radar networks. This is the fog of digital war. The attack does not need to be sophisticated. It only needs to achieve one of two outcomes: create false positives, ghost missiles on the screen, or blind the system entirely. In either scenario, the protocol's logic forces the commander's hand. If the screen shows 1,000 Phantom missiles, the choice is to launch based on that data, or bet the nation's existence that it's a bluff. But if the screen goes black, a total sensory deprivation attack, the dilemma becomes absolute. Is the silence a simple network failure, or is it the quiet before a decapitation strike that has already been launched? The commander is forced to launch out of fear. This is a calculated leverage play, a known vulnerability analyzed by institutions like CSIS. The adversary's objective is not to trigger a nuclear exchange, but to force the U.S. into a state of permanent, high-cost alert, further draining its financial endurance. By creating a credible threat of a fog of war scenario, they paralyze strategic decision-making and accelerate the solvency crisis. The line from national debt to nuclear risk is not theoretical. It is a pre-programmed command protocol waiting for a single, corrupted data packet. The adversary's operational blueprint is no longer theoretical. The central vulnerability is not military, but systemic financial insolvency. According to CSIS analysis, conventional platforms like the F-16 are being deliberately neutralized by forcing confrontations into asymmetric, non-kinetic arenas. The next phase is not a declaration of war. It is a calibration shot to test the fragility of the American economic system under duress. Within the next 12 months, expect a non-kinetic, attribution impossible event targeting a critical U.S. energy export node. The Vector will be a cascading systems failure at a major liquefied natural gas (LNG) terminal on the Gulf Coast. The event will be framed publicly as an industrial accident or a complex ransomware attack, masking the state-level actor. The objective is to sever a key artery of America's energy weapon, as detailed in reports on petrodollar defense, creating a shockwave of volatility in global energy markets, a direct test of the dollar's resilience. It is an economic launch-on-warning protocol. This is not designed to destroy infrastructure, but to measure the response time, political paralysis, and financial damage absorption rate of a hegemon burdened by a $38 trillion liability. It is a data collection exercise to calculate the precise pressure required to trigger a systemic solvency crisis.